Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome to the channel. UFC 290, Alexander Volkanovski versus Yair Rodriguez just ended, and this is going to be my full card post-fight. I'm going to go through every single fight on the card and give you my reaction and analysis, and what a fight card this was. Starting off with the first fight of the night, Esteban Ribovics versus Kamuela Kirk. Ribovics gets it done via decision, and it wasn't looking good for Ribovics in the first round. He got taken down. He had nothing to offer off of his back. He couldn't get back to his feet, but every round it starts standing. And in the second round, Kirk was noticeably tired, and then the takedowns came more labored, and Ribovics was able to stuff the takedowns, and Ribovics started lighting him up on the feet and landing good combinations, dropped him twice, beat him up badly, came close to finishing him in the second round. And I thought the second round was a 10-8 round for Ribovics, and then in the third round, pretty much more of the same, except Kirk got an early takedown, but because he was tired, Ribovics was able to out-scramble him, get back to his feet, land some bigger combinations, land some good shots in the third round, and basically you have Kamuela Kirk just shooting in on desperation takedowns while Ribovics is landing good combinations on the feet. It was clearly bare minimum a 29-28 win for Ribovics, but I think one judge gave it to him 29-27. They gave him that 10-8 second round. But good performance by Ribovics. He's still pretty young. He gets it done via decision. Moving up on the card, Jesus Aguilar versus Shannon Ross. Not a whole lot to talk about in terms of this fight. Shannon Ross gets brutally KO'd 17 seconds into the first round, eats a massive right hand, and gets slept out cold. Jesus Aguilar in his T-Rex arms gets it done. Not a whole lot to say about this fight. Shannon Ross is probably on the chopping block. He's getting up there in age. He's now 13-8 in his pro MMA career. And Jesus Aguilar just brutally KOs him in the first round. So phenomenal performance for Aguilar, but not a whole lot of analysis to give of that fight. Moving up on the card, Saaiman versus Terrence Mitchell. Terrence Mitchell came in on short notice, and you could tell. He shot in on a takedown early, but Saaiman kind of locked up a tight guillotine, but it really didn't matter. Terrence Mitchell kind of fought out of it, ended up on top, but Saaiman, very good on bottom, was able to scramble out of the position. He was able to get back to his feet, was landing good shots in the clinch, eventually dragged Terrence Mitchell to the ground, then ended up getting his back, flattening him out, and just finishing him off with the ground and pound. Saaiman looked good in this fight. He finishes him in the first round via TKO, and he pretty much dominated him outside of getting taken down early in the first round. But really, there's not a whole lot to say. Terrence Mitchell, you know, we don't even really know how good he is. There's not even a whole lot of footage that you can watch of his fights. He came in on short notice from an Alaskan promotion. I'm sure he'll get another fight in the UFC, but Saaiman did what he was supposed to do in this fight. A lot of guys have been failing to do that recently. There's been guys coming in on short notice, getting wins, not against Saaiman. Saaiman is a very interesting prospect in the bantamweight division. We didn't see a whole lot of his striking, but he was able to out-grapple Terrence Mitchell with ease. And even after he got taken down early, able to scramble out of that position. And even though he was controlled for a little bit, I think he used an arm bar to scramble back to his feet initially, so he looked very well-rounded in this fight. Moving up on the card, Vitor Petrino versus Marcin Prachnio. Vitor Petrino gets it done in the third round via arm triangle. This fight was underwhelming, to say the least. This was probably the worst fight on the card, just going off of memory right now. The first round, both guys were landing good shots. Petrino was landing good kicks. Prachnio got hurt in the first round, and then Petrino just shot in on a takedown after hurting him. He probably could have finished him, but then shot in on a takedown. Both guys were clearly tired after the first round, moving slow in the second round. Petrino shot in on another takedown in the second round. Didn't do a whole lot of damage with his ground and pound. Looked for a straight arm bar, and then looked for a rear naked choke. At one point, he got his back, but none of it was really ever closed. And then in the third round, it was another slow start. Both guys were slowing down. Eventually, Petrino got him down, was looking for a Kimura at one point, and then eventually got the arm triangle over Prachnio. But honestly, even though he got the finish in the third round, I don't think this was that good of a performance. He really didn't look all that good. The stamina didn't look that good. The ground and pound didn't look that good. The striking didn't look that good. He landed some heavy kicks in this fight. He landed some good shots in this fight. But if you're slowing down after the first round and you're supposed to be an elite level athlete, that's a little bit disappointing, but nonetheless, he gets it done via third round arm triangle. Moving up on the card, we had Jimmy Crute versus Alonzo Menifield 2. Jimmy Crute loses this fight. Who would have predicted this? Who would have predicted Alonzo Menifield to get a second round guillotine? First round was Alonzo Menifield. Jimmy Crute was eating shots on the feet. Menifield was landing good power shots. Jimmy Crute has taken so much damage. I swear he's the only guy, I think, maybe there's another one I just can't think of. Jimmy Crute's the only guy that moves like he has CTE. He just always looks like he's rocked when he's moving. The footwork is weird. He looks off balance. He's eating big shots in the first round. He's clinching up, just holding on to the clinch for dear life, landing some knees to the body. Menifield looked like he started to get tired at the end of the first round, but it was still a 10-9 round for Menifield. And then in the second round, Crute was getting chewed up on the feet, shot it on a double leg, switched to a single leg, and Menifield locks up a guillotine against the fence and makes Jimmy Crute tap out in the second round. And I think Jimmy Crute's retiring after this fight, which I'm happy for because he's looked horrible and he's taken a lot of damage. So he needs to go back to the drawing board. He needs to take some time off. And honestly, maybe he needs to find a new career. That's very sad to say, but he just does not look that good. He does not look like himself in there. He moves like he's perpetually rocked. And honestly, he came into this fight in better shape, so it's not like he's not taking it seriously. But he gets finished by Alonzo Menifield in the second round via guillotine. I don't think Menifield looked all that great, but he does get the finish. I worry about his cardio, but he does have good power, and it is in the light heavyweight division, which isn't the best weight class. So I think Jimmy Crute was already ranked, so Menifield will probably be ranked when they update the rankings. Moving up on the card, we have Denise Gomes versus Yazmin Jauregui. This was a fight that I said, Yazmin Jauregui is this massive favorite on Tapology. Denise Gomes, from what I saw, she has nasty power and very fast hands, and Denise Gomes brutally finishes her in the first round, 20 seconds into the first round. She lands a massive right hand, flash KOs her, then lands another right hand, and then just smashes her. Just absolutely smashes her as she's trying to get up against the fence. She's just landing shots. Some people were saying this was an early stoppage. If anything, you could consider this a late stoppage. I thought it was a fine stoppage by the referee. Yazmin Jauregui, her hype, if you want to say, she had a little bit of hype behind her because she looked, like she had great cardio and volume, ends at UFC 290. She got destroyed by Denise Gomes. Moving up on the card, I believe this was this was a second to last prelim. You had Tatsuro Taira versus Edgar Chairez. This fight was kind of disappointing because Tatsuro Taira took this fight on short notice. He was supposed to fight a couple weeks ago. They brought in Edgar Chairez on short notice, and I really thought Taira would get it done. I thought he'd be able to find a finish. He got dropped in the first round, and then Chairez looked for a guillotine and ends up on bottom and then gets out-grappled for the rest of the round. And then in the second round, he was landing good shots again, jumps on a guillotine again, and then gets dominated. He gets absolutely dominated. He gets full mounted. He gets smashed with elbows. Taira's got to be careful. He started to throw some 12-6 elbows. I know the referees are a little bit weird because any possible angle on the elbow is fine, even if it looks like it's coming straight down. But it was making me worried he was going to throw a 12-6 elbow and get disqualified. But he beat him up badly in that round. Looked for a triangle choke to end the second round. Probably would have had it. If not, Chairez was saved by the bell. And then the third round, Taira losing on the feet again. Gets a takedown. Chairez looks for a guillotine again. Chairez got up in the third round, and then Taira just got him down again. And then Taira almost gets guillotined at the end of the third round, ends up getting mounted, but he gets saved by the bell. So there was 2 submission attempts in this fight that were very close for each guy, and both guys got saved by the bell. Taira gets it done. He's super young, but his striking still leaves a lot to be desired, and his gas tank also leaves a lot to be desired. He started to look tired in the third round, but we know what Taira is. He's an elite level grappler with amazing jiu-jitsu who's constantly looking for submissions, and he gets it done against a short notice Edgar Chairez. Moving up on the card, probably my favorite fight of the card, even though it only lasted a little while. We have Robbie Lawler versus Niko Price. Robbie Lawler gets it done via first round KO, and I could not be happier. This was Robbie Lawler's retirement fight, and this was absolutely beautiful. This was a beautiful performance from Robbie Lawler. Gets it done so quickly and takes no damage. They clinch up. Robbie Lawler just starts landing left hands as they're like in a modified clinch with a little bit of space between them. Lands an uppercut, another left hand, and just absolutely shuts the lights off of Niko Price. Niko Price just drops like a dead body. He was playing the Court McGee, but he was actually out cold, and Robbie Lawler gets it done in his final fight in the UFC. This was actually emotional. I was sad. Robbie Lawler has been one of my favorite fighters for many years. He's one of my top three favorite fighters of all time. And I'm just so happy, and I hope he doesn't come back, to be honest. I'm just so happy to see him get a big win on a big card and ride off into the sunset. And the UFC showed an amazing highlight reel afterwards, kind of as a goodbye to Robbie Lawler. And I got to give the UFC credit when credit's due. It was beautiful, but Robbie Lawler gets it done. I think he's 41 years old. He's clearly slowed down. And, you know, Nico Price was a manageable opponent. I thought Robbie Lawler would win this fight initially, but then I thought maybe my biases is getting the best of me. And so I picked Nico Price, but I was hoping and praying to the MMA gods that Robbie Lawler would get it done. And he gets it done in spectacular fashion in the first round. Brutally KOs Nico Price. Nico Price really had nothing to offer in this fight. It ended so quickly, so there's really not to say a whole lot about him. But I'm so happy Robbie Lawler rides off into the sunset with a phenomenal MMA career, and I will never forget the memories of those absolute wars that he put on, whether it was against Johnny Hendricks, the first fight, or against Carlos Condit, or against Rory McDonald. Those fights were incredible. They will be forever ingrained into my memory. So shout out to Robbie Lawler. Absolutely love Robbie Lawler. He's an absolute savage. So happy to see him get it done at UFC 290, one of the biggest cards of the year. Moving up the card to the first fight on the main card, we had Bo Nickal versus Val Woodburn. I mean, this fight pretty much ended how we kind of thought it would, but Bo Nickal didn't use the grappling, so I guess not. But we all thought it would end first round stoppage. I picked Bo Nickal first round submission. So Bo Nickal did impress me a little bit. This fight really didn't last particularly long. This was a first round finish as well. 38 seconds into the first round. Bo Nickal just landed a nasty right hand, started to back up, then closed the distance, landed another left hand, then another right hand, then another left hand, then a left uppercut, and just dropped Val Woodburn badly. I thought it was a bit of an early stoppage by the ref. I think Val was kind of trying to, recover and grab on the belt, but I don't think it changed the outcome of the fight. I do not think it changed the outcome of the fight at all. I think Bo would have inevitably finished him. And his hands, Bo Nickal's hands looked incredible. And Bo Nickal, I mean, I know people look at him as this dominant wrestler, this NCAA wrestler, but he's shown that he's not just wrestling. He has some striking, and we don't know how good it is because at this point in time, he's not fighting the highest level of competition. And I want to complain about it, and I've kind of talked about, I think Bo Nickal's overhyped, but I think it's a little bit premature to complain about it because Bo Nickal's still early in his career. He's barely had any MMA fights, so I think it's fine for the UFC kind of to give him that slow burn. But I'll be annoyed if we get a year, 2 years from now, and we're still watching Bo Nickal fight super low-level competition because he does look very good, and I want to see him against some top competition. But Bo Nickal gets it done via first-round KO. Great performance against a short-notice Val Woodburn. Moving up on the card, and this is where we get to some of the shocking performances on the card. Moving up on the card, Dan Hooker versus Jalin Turner. Dan Hooker gets it done via split decision. It should have been unanimous decision. Dan Hooker won this fight. And I am shocked that Dan Hooker won this fight, even though he's going through a midlife crisis. First round, Jalin Turner clearly won. Jalin Turner did miss weight, so I wonder how much. Did he have an injury? Did he have an issue with, obviously he had an issue with his weight cut, but he looked a little bit off after the first round. First round, Jalin Turner won the fight. Dan Hooker was putting out a lot of volume, but I thought Turner was landing the better shots. Turner was switching stances, landing good teeps to the gut body, landing good shots on Hooker, hurt Hooker to the body a little bit, not badly, not where he came close to a finish, but I thought Turner in the first round was just landing the more damaging shots, and I thought it was a clear round for Jalin Turner. I thought maybe you could give it to Dan Hooker on volume, but I thought if you score it the proper way, Jalin Turner gets the first round. And then in the second round, Turner was eating him up. Turner was landing good head kicks. At one point, Dan Hooker ate a head kick that I thought would put him out cold. He ate a head kick that I thought would put him out cold. And then Turner, like maybe a minute and a half, 2 minutes, maybe midway through the second round, Turner started to fade. And Dan Hooker started to not respect any of his power and started pressing forward. And Dan Hooker just starts swarming him like the last minute and a half. 2 minutes of the second round, just starts swarming and beating him up against the fence, landing combinations, eventually drops Jalin Turner or melts him. I can't even remember how he ended up on the ground. He just might have just fell to the ground, but it was from combinations of Dan Hooker. But I don't know if he got clipped with one big shot. I just think he was kind of off balance, eating shots, kind of fell over himself. He was tired. He ended up on the ground. Dan Hooker gets a tight rear naked choke, but Jalin Turner is saved by the bell. And at this point, I'm like, okay, the momentum is going in Dan Hooker's favor. They come out in the third round. Jalin Turner looks refreshed. Jalin Turner comes out strong, starts landing some good shots. That lasted for about 35, 40 seconds. And then he started to gas again, and Dan Hooker just started to put it on him. Or actually, after Jalin Turner started to gas, he shot it on a takedown, got a takedown, controlled Dan Hooker for maybe 30 seconds. Dan Hooker gets back to his feet, immediately starts putting the pressure on him. Dan Hooker knew Jalin Turner was starting to get tired. Dan Hooker started to put the pressure on him, started to beat him up, started to land some good shots, eventually melts him on the feet in the third round. Looks like he might finish him, but Dan Hooker's starting to get tired at this point. And then the fight ends with Dan Hooker on top of Turner. Turner not really able to get up. And then I think the last 10 seconds, Turner finally got back to his feet. But Dan Hooker clearly won the second round and clearly won the third round, in my opinion. I just don't see how third round, there's no way you can give it to Jalin Turner. Jalin Turner completely lost almost the entirety of the third round. But the second round, maybe, I don't really see how you give Jalin Turner the second round. The only round you can give him is the first round. So whatever judge scored it for Jalin Turner needs to be punished and needs to be reprimanded for a horrible scorecard. But Dan Hooker, this is shocking. A lot of us, myself included, thought Dan Hooker's starting to become washed. He's matched up with an up-and-coming contender in Jalin Turner. And he goes out there and puts on a gutsy performance like this. He was beaten up. He was bloodied. He was battered. But he kept moving forward. What is Dan Hooker made of? Dan Hooker this reminded me of the Edson Barboza fight where Edson Barboza was just ripping him up with body kicks and just smashing him. I think Edson Barboza eventually got the finish, but Dan Hooker was like, what is going to put this guy down? That's how I felt in this fight, because Turner was landing some good shots, but Dan Hooker just waded through the danger, and Jalin Turner, I guess, had a bad weight cut. Maybe he had an injury in camp, started to slow down, and then he eventually loses the fight. And had Hooker had a little bit more stamina, I think he would have finished Jalin Turner. Had he had a little bit more time at the end of the second round, he would have finished Jalin Turner via rear naked choke. But this is a massive hit in terms of the prospects of Jalin Turner, because people were already calling him a weight bully and that he was too big for lightweight. Now he misses weight. He gasses out in this fight. I think the move may be for Turner to move up to 170 pounds. After this performance, you lose to Dan Hooker, who's an aging veteran, who's one of the biggest names that you get. Now you're on a 2-fight losing streak. This is not a good look for Jalin Turner. I don't know what's next for his career. Probably a move to 170. If he misses weight again, if he fights at lightweight, that's going to be an absolute horrible look. But Dan Hooker gets it done. Super impressive, super gritty performance, and a solid fight. Moving up on the card, the feature fight of the night, and what an absolute shocker. Robert Whittaker versus Dricus du Plessis. Dricus du Plessis win. I never thought in a million years I'd be saying this. Dricus du Plessis gets it done via second round TKO. And honestly, Dricus just bullied Robert Whittaker in this fight. It was shocking to witness. It was absolutely shocking to witness. And what's crazy is, we have to give Dricus du Plessis his respect here, because he gets it done against one of the best middleweights in the division, if not the second best middleweight in the division, against other than Israel Adesanya. Dricus was losing the first round. He was getting outstruck by Whittaker in the first round. Whittaker was landing some good jabs. Whittaker even got a takedown, a little bit of control time in the first round. But then towards the end of the first round, du Plessis got a takedown of his own, starts landing some nasty elbows, cuts up Robert Whittaker, clearly takes the first round at the end, like the last minute and a half, takes the first round by smashing Robert Whittaker on the ground. It was clearly the most damaging strikes of the entire fight. And then the second round, and it's looking like the second round's looking like the beginning of the first round. Robert Whittaker's pumping the jab, throwing some combinations. And then Dricus, throughout the fight, Dricus was landing some good body kicks. He was landing some good leg kicks. He was landing hard leg kicks throughout this fight. In the second round, Dricus literally drops Robert Whittaker with a jab. Drops him with a jab. Whittaker gets back up. Dricus throws a heavy leg kick. Robert Whittaker kind of reacts to that. And Dricus realizes Whittaker's hurt. Just starts charging forward. Squared up stance. Throwing combinations. Doesn't really look aesthetically pleasing at all. Like, this performance, even though it's phenomenal by Dricus, from a technical skill point, it really didn't look all that good. Starts just marching Whittaker down, throwing combinations, lighting Whittaker up. Whittaker backs up against the fence, and then Dricus just starts swarming him with shots, landing a shot to the body, landing an uppercut, and just absolutely melts Robert Whittaker against the fence. Whittaker drops to the ground, ends up covering up in a ball, and Dricus just swarms him with brutal ground and pound and finishes Robert Whittaker. What a shocking performance. I still can't fathom it. I still can't fathom that this happened. But I will say this. People are going to attempt to delegitimize this win from Dricus and talk about how terrible he is and talk about how his striking's horrible and his grappling's horrible and his cardio's horrible. I think there's going to be a lot of people that do that, because even in this win, the skills still don't look aesthetically pleasing. But I've said this a million times, whether it comes to Dricus, whether it comes to somebody like Merab, it doesn't matter how it looks, to be honest. It matters how effective it is. And Dricus du Plessis went out there against an elite level middleweight in Robert Whittaker, the second best middleweight in the division at the time of the fight, the beginning of the fight. And Dricus went out there and absolutely bullied him, ragdolled him, and destroyed him in this fight. Absolutely destroyed him. I don't want to say dominant win, but it's a dominant win because the shots that Whittaker landed, even though a couple of the jabs snapped Dricus' head back, I mean, Dricus was just walking through. There was a clear, not only a clear size differential in this fight, there was a clear reaction to damage in this fight. There was a clear power discrepancy in this fight. When Dricus would land, it would have an effect. When Whittaker would land, Dricus would just look at him and just continue to move forward. You know, just continue to move forward. And I noticed in the first round, even though Whittaker was getting the better of some of the exchanges, Dricus was coming dangerously close to landing some of these big shots. And Whittaker, I know people have said he's chinny, and he has been rocked a lot throughout his career. But when have we ever seen him bully like that? I mean, the only time we've ever seen him finish that badly was against Israel Adesanya in the first fight. So at this point, this is going to sound crazy, and I never thought I would say this. I don't think you're crazy if you pick Dricus du Plessis against Israel Adesanya. That's how good Dricus is. That's how good he is. I mean, the grappling is there. I said even in my prediction video, I thought the Dricus cardio narrative, even though I thought it was partially true, I never thought it was, I thought it was overblown a bit because the way he was throwing shots, even though he looked exhausted, he was still throwing shots. I did still think he was more tired, and he looked tired in this fight as well. I know people are going to say, oh, two-nostril Dricus. Oh, this is a new mythical fighter. I mean, that probably has some effect, but really, he was still breathing and kind of moving the same way, and it was kind of sloppy on the feet. I mean, you're running forward, squared up with your opponent, throwing combinations. It just does not look that good, but he went out there and destroyed Robert Whittaker. So what more can we say? We have to start giving this guy his respect. And I know there's people, I don't know why people do this on the internet. There's people that'll clown me and other people. What'd you say about Dricus? You're not allowed to be wrong. You've picked every fight correct ever. So my analysis was wrong. My thought process was wrong. My analysis necessarily wasn't wrong, but my prediction was wrong. And that's it. We live and we learn. We learn about these guys. You're not picking every fight right, ever. It's just not going to happen. So I was not a believer in Dricus du Plessis. And now I don't know whether to call myself a believer or what, because at this point, he could beat Israel Adesanya. All bets are off. He destroyed Robert Whittaker. He could beat Israel Adesanya. I'm not necessarily saying I would pick Dricus du Plessis against Israel Adesanya, but to go out there and melt Robert Whittaker in this capacity was so impressive. I thought it was the best performance of the night, and I think we have to start respecting the skill set. It may not be an Israel Adesanya striking performance. It may not be, a Alex Pereira striking performance, but Dricus du Plessis is a well-rounded fighter who will never say die. That's what I talked about going into this fight. Say what you will about his skill set, he will never quit. And there was no points in here where he even had to even think about quitting because Whittaker never really had a shot in this fight. I mean, to think about that Darren Till, Derek Brunson, and Brad Tavares did better against Dricus than Robert Whittaker is enough to make my head explode right now. I honestly may have to make a full video on this. Let me know down in the comments if you want to see full videos about some of these other fights like Dricus versus Whittaker and the co-main event, which we'll talk about in a second. But Dricus du Plessis gets it done. Phenomenal performance. Destroys Robert Whittaker. And we're going to see du Plessis versus Israel Adesanya at UFC 293 in September, hopefully. I think it's a little bit disrespectful to make Dricus have to make this quick turnaround. And I also thought it was corny as hell to bring Adesanya into the cage and kind of ruin du Plessis' moment. This was a big win. Let it marinate for a little bit. Let him enjoy it. Why do we got to do these weird, cringy standoffs? And I'm going to hate the build-up to Israel Adesanya versus Dricus du Plessis because all we're going to have to hear about is who breathes African air and who doesn't. The dumbest narrative. I think this whole entire beef is manufactured. I don't care about it at all. But what I do care about is it's going to be a very compelling matchup. But du Plessis gets it done against all odds. Everyone counted him out. And he gets it done against Robert Whittaker. And now he's earned himself a title shot. Super impressive performance. I can't compliment him enough. To have that type of resolve, to have that type of power, to have that type of heart, to have that type of self-belief, and go out there and dispatch Robert Whittaker. I mean, this is probably the most impressive win over Robert Whittaker ever, outside of maybe Israel Adesanya's title performance. So we have to give credit where credit's due. Dricus du Plessis, super impressive win at UFC 290. Moving on to the co-main event, we have Brandon Moreno versus Alexandre Pantoja 3. This was the only real controversial decision on the card. Alexandre Pantoja is your new flyweight champion. He wins via decision. I haven't taken a look at the scorecards 100%. I saw them. They flashed them on the broadcast. But I think one judge gave it 49-46 for Brandon Moreno. And I think they gave 2, 3, 4, and 5 for Moreno. And then I think the other judges scored it for Alexandre Pantoja. I think they gave him 1, 3, and 5. I think that's what they gave him, the other two judges. I'm not 100% sure. But either way, Alexandre Pantoja gets it done and wins via decision to take the belt off of Brandon Moreno. This was an amazing fight. This was a compelling fight. This was one of the best fights of the year. This is one of the best fights of the year. This is one of the best title fights in recent memory. I do not believe this was a robbery. I think people are going to call it a robbery. I scored it for Brandon Moreno. I scored this fight for Brandon Moreno. We'll go through it round by round. Round 1 and round 2, I think, were the clearest rounds of the fight. I'm going to go back and rewatch this fight. Maybe I'll make another video on it later this week. But round 1, I thought was a very clear round for Alexandre Pantoja. You had Moreno had a decent early start, landed some good shots, shot him on a takedown, got him down, but then Pantoja gets back to his feet, drops Brandon Moreno, and then eats him up with some ground and pound, lands some good elbows. Moreno got back up, landed some good shots, but Pantoja clearly did more damage. Second round, Pantoja looked like he started to slow down, and I said, okay, it's going to be the beginning of the end here. Pantoja's starting to slow down a little bit. Moreno was landing some good combinations. Pantoja was landing some good shots as well, some big shots as well, but Moreno was just eating them and landing more volume and big shots himself. He eventually ducked under a punch from Pantoja, got his back, controlled him for a little bit, had both hooks in, really was unable to do anything with it, and then they got back to their feet, and Moreno outstruck him on the feet for the rest of the round as well, landed some good jabs. Pantoja landed some shots himself. I thought round 2 was clearly for Moreno, 10-9. So round 1, Pantoja. Round 2, Moreno, clearly. Round 3 is debatable. Round 3 is kind of debatable. You had some elbows early from Moreno. Then Pantoja got his back for a while, controlled Moreno, looking for a submission. Eventually, they got back to their feet. And then Moreno was landing some good head kicks in this round, but they were kind of partially blocked by Pantoja. Moreno got a takedown, and then they scrambled back to their feet. And then I think he got another takedown. Then there was a scramble where Pantoja, I'm trying to remember, this fight card was crazy. I think what happened was Moreno got a takedown. Or no, I think Pantoja maybe got a takedown. Moreno scrambled to end up being on top. And then you have Moreno on top, and then he eats an up kick from Pantoja. And then Pantoja starts landing some elbows from his back, some brutal elbows. And I thought the elbows in the third round combined with the up kick that Pantoja landed in the third round. And Pantoja landed a couple up kicks in this third round. I thought round 3 was for Pantoja. I thought it was kind of debatable because you had the early really good elbows from Moreno. But I thought the third round was pretty clear for Pantoja. And then you have round 4. Round 4, Moreno was landing some good shots on the feet. Pantoja got a takedown, didn't really do any damage with it. I think he controlled his back a little bit in the fourth round as well. Eventually, Moreno got out of it, landed some elbows on the feet as well. I thought round 4 I thought it was Moreno's round. I thought it was his round. I know Pantoja had some control time, but didn't really do a lot of damage. Didn't really do any damage in the fourth round. And at least not in the grappling aspect. But I do understand Pantoja did land some shots on the feet as well. And then in the fifth round, Moreno was landing good shots on the feet. Eventually, Pantoja gets a takedown, got his back. I don't remember the exact exchange where Pantoja ended up on his back. But then he was like standing up. He had the back mount, body triangle in, and didn't do anything with it. I thought round 5, and maybe people are going to crucify me for this, I thought round 5 was Moreno's round. I thought he clearly did more damage. I thought Pantoja got the back, did absolutely nothing with it. So I scored it 2, 4, and 5 for Brandon Moreno, but I don't think it's a bad scorecard to score 1, 3. Honestly, you could do 1, 3, 4, and 5 for Pantoja, and I wouldn't complain. But I just don't see how you give round 5 to Pantoja. He really did no damage in round 5 at all. I guess if you want to say he landed some good shots on the feet, maybe it was kind of even, and then he had the back mount, so you want to say that's how he won it. I'm going to have to go back and rewatch this fight. This fight was wild. There was crazy exchanges. But ultimately, I scored it for Moreno, 2, 4, and 5. But I don't hate the decision. I mean, Pantoja landed some good shots, and this fight was very interesting because Moreno fought at Pantoja's pace, which I did not think would happen. It was like he fought the perfect fight for Pantoja. He didn't really have a lot of movement. He just kind of wanted to stand there and brawl with Pantoja, which is what Pantoja loves. And then he created some moments where Pantoja was able to end up on the back and get some control time. And he defended well, avoided the submission well, which I thought he'd be able to do because he has excellent jiu-jitsu. But the control time itself, when you have a very close round, is, going to lose you the fight. So, you know what I mean? Because if you think on the feet, maybe the 4th and 5th round was close on the feet. I didn't think the 5th round particularly was not close on the feet. But if you think they were close, you think they were even, then you see the control time of Pantoja, you can easily give 4 and 5 to Pantoja. So then you have basically 1, 4, and 5 for Pantoja. You could do 1, 3, 4, and 5 for Pantoja. I don't like the judges' scorecard that had it for Moreno, 2 through 5. But I don't absolutely hate it. I think a lot of the times these judges' scorecards get blown out of proportion. I can see a world where maybe you give 2, 3, 4, and 5 to Moreno. I think that's a little bit too generous, and I don't like it. But at the end of the day, I don't think it's the craziest scorecard, especially when you're having these wild war, crazy exchanges. But what a phenomenal fight. We might have to book this again. We might get Brandon Moreno in another quadrilogy. Brandon Moreno versus Alexandre Pantoja 4 is the fight that I want to see. It's the fight I want to see. I mean, right now you got Brandon Royval kind of waiting in the wings, Amir Albazi waiting in the wings. Is either one of those fights more compelling than the Brandon Moreno 4th fight? I don't think so. And both guys looked phenomenal in this fight. Both guys striking looked unbelievable. Apparently, Brandon Moreno broke his hand in the first round. Also, Dan Hooker broke his arm. I meant to mention that in the earlier, when I talked about that fight earlier. But, you could kind of sell it from that angle. Plus, who wouldn't want to see this again? Who wouldn't want to see this again? I know people are always complaining, oh, I don't want to see Brandon Moreno versus Davison Figueiredo 4. I don't want to see Brandon Moreno, Alexandre Pantoja 4. Those other 2 fights don't matter. Those other 2 fights, they weren't even close to their primes. They are in their primes right now, had a razor-close fight, a highly competitive fight. I want to see it again. Pantoja impressed me a lot with his cardio. I really thought in that second round he was starting to fade. I thought, okay, he's going to get finished in the later rounds. But no, he was able to just continue to plot forward, land big shots. Moreno was beating him up with the jab. Moreno didn't really throw a whole lot of kicks. For having a broken hand, he didn't throw a whole lot of kicks in this fight. Pantoja was just able to be very durable, able to mix in the grappling in the moments that he needed, and he was able to get it done via decision. And I don't hate the decision. Anybody calling it a robbery, I think it's crazy. Far too often now, we're calling fights robberies when they're not robberies. Alexandre Pantoja is a super exciting flyweight champion. And you know what I had to think about when I was watching this fight? At one point, Dana White in the UFC wanted to abolish the flyweight division, which I think is absolutely egregious. And, think about the fights we've seen over the last 2 years or since 2020 between Moreno and Figgy and Pantoja. Incredible fights. Absolutely incredible fights. Great win by Alexandre Pantoja. He gets it done. Super gritty performance. Super gutsy performance. And I don't think you can take anything away from either one of these guys. Moving on to the main event, Alexander Volkanovski versus Yair Rodriguez. What a performance by Alexander Volkanovski. And I already did a full breakdown on the main event as well. I will link it down in the description if you want to go check it out after this, as well as the end cards. I want to say it's a dominant performance from Alexander Volkanovski, and it kind of was. But if you start kind of putting context to it and breaking down different moments in the fight, I think Yair had some moments in this fight. So I don't want to say it's utter domination, but I'll tell you this was a masterclass by Alexander Volkanovski. He looked incredible. He caught a kick early, took Yair Rodriguez down early in the first round, controlled him for a bit. Yair would scramble back to his feet. Volkanovski would get him right back down. I think he scrambled up like twice. Volkanovski eventually got him down, started beating him up a little bit towards the end of the first round. Yair accepted the position, started throwing elbows from the bottom. Clear round for Volkanovski. The second round, Volkanovski was striking with him a bit, landed a left hand, kind of hurt Yair a little bit. Yair started to back off. Volkanovski got over aggressive, got clipped with a massive counter right hand. And a lot of people didn't see that, but Volkanovski shot in immediately on the takedown, got the takedown. Yair started to get back up. There were some scrambles. Eventually got taken down again once or twice. Then Volk kind of gets into a dominant position and just starts dominating Yair Rodriguez with elbows, with ground and pound, with nasty elbows. Yair just starts to accept the position, throw elbows from his back, and just, he cut open Volkanovski. But Volkanovski clearly dominated the second round after eating that one shot in the feet. And then round 3 where Alexander Volkanovski gets the TKO. This was Yair's best round. Yair was winning the majority of this round, believe it or not. Yair was landing good shots on the feet. He was landing some head kicks. Volk was rolling with him well and getting out of range very well. But Volk was just striking with him. Volk shot in on like one takedown half-hearted like early in this round, but really didn't seem to commit to it at all. And then you had Yair landing some good kicks to the leg, some good kicks, some good head kicks as well. I just stumbled over my words for like 5 seconds there. But Yair landed like a good punch behind a head kick as well. He was landing some good leg kicks. Volk landed a couple leg kicks. There was a head clash in this round. Yair got the worst of it. They took a 1.5-minute break. They came back. Yair was still landing some good shots, landed a good body kick in this round. Then I think Yair started to get a little bit over-aggressive. Yair started to throw some wild punches, eats a massive counter shot from Volkanovski. Volkanovski hurts him bad. Yair starts to back up against the fence. Volkanovski starts swarming him with big shots around his guard. Uppercut, then a rip to the body. Then he says, you know what? He's blocking so high, let me just dump him down. Double leg, dumps him down, gets into like a full mount, 3/4 mount, just starts smashing him, realizes Yair Rodriguez isn't defending at all. Stands up on his feet, just starts brutalizing him with both hands, ground and pound, and then eventually the referee steps in. Yair Rodriguez had every chance from the ref to be able to get back up. He was just done. And Volkanovski is one of the greatest fighters of all time. That's not just the featherweight division. He's one of the greatest fighters of all time. And we have to appreciate the moment in time we're in. I've been watching this sport for long. I've been watching this sport since 2010, 13 years. You don't realize it sometimes. When you're watching, you don't realize what a moment in time you're in. And we have to realize how good Alexander Volkanovski is. And he's probably the most well-rounded fighter in the UFC. I mean, is there a hole in his game? Because I can't find it. He's unbelievably durable. I mean, Yair landed a good combination in a head kick and a right hand in the third round that I thought would have rocked another opponent. Volk just ate it and continued to move forward. The guy has unbelievable grappling, unbelievable submission defense, good jiu-jitsu. I mean, the stamina is unbelievable, almost suspiciously unbelievable. Where's the hole in Volkanovski's game? He just looks incredible. So we have to appreciate how good Volkanovski is. And I think people are going to say, oh, well, Yair never had a chance. Yair had some moments in this fight. Yair's a very dangerous opponent. And Volkanovski came out here and put on a masterclass, world-class performance against Yair Rodriguez, and even pretty much did exactly what I thought he would do in terms of he would grapple early and often to kind of sap the energy of Yair Rodriguez, and then eventually kind of strike with him a bit just to kind of prove a point on a kind of more tired Yair Rodriguez, and that's what he did, and he eventually found the finish. He eventually found that, I think it was a right hand at the end, where Volk clipped him and then eventually found the finish. Volkanovski, I mean, we're living in the Volkanovski era, and it wouldn't shock me if he eventually becomes a double champion and wins the lightweight belt. I would love to see him take on Ilia Topuria later this year. I would love to see him take on Islam Makhachev later this year. Islam needs an opponent in Abu Dhabi in October at UFC 294, so maybe that happens. I know he said he had a surgery, but apparently he came out and said that surgery is not going to stop me from potentially fighting in October. I could probably do that. So we got a lot to look forward to with Alexander Volkanovski. He's a guy that's always taken on contender fights. He's not ever trying to duck a fight or avoid a certain contender. I'd love to see him take on Ilia Topuria, but to be honest, I don't see any contender in the division that I think can take out Alexander Volkanovski right now. He is that good. He is that unbelievable. And this was a masterclass performance with the wrestling, with the striking, with the power, with the durability, with the stamina. Everything about this performance from Volkanovski was a solid performance and a performance to remember. I was super impressed. But what more can you ask out of Alexander Volkanovski? The guy looked unbelievable at UFC 276 against Max Holloway. He looked unbelievable in a loss to Islam Makhachev. He went out there and defeated Yair Rodriguez and finished him in the third round. Yair Rodriguez is very durable. So to go out there and put a statement win like that by TKOing Yair Rodriguez in the third round was super impressive. This was an amazing card. This was one of the best cards of the year, the best card of the year. I didn't do very good in picks. I went 7-6 tonight on the card. But who would have thought? Moreno loses. Moreno losing isn't that shocking. Whittaker losing is super shocking. Turner losing is super shocking. Outside of that, none of the other picks that lost shocked me at all because I got Moreno, Whittaker, Turner, Price, Jauregui, and Crute wrong. I didn't like the Crute pick at all when I made the pick, but I was like, I think he could out-grapple him. But nonetheless, you can't win them all. But UFC 290, best fight of the year, one of the best fights in the last few years, to be honest. It was that good, that entertaining. Loved UFC 290. It absolutely delivered. Let me know what you guys think about all the fights down in the comments. Don't forget to like the video. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. And thank you so much for watching.